I'm only going to take you through part of the evening because we're really blessed tonight that we're finally landing creative conversations in the classroom, and we're so excited about that. We've thrown out so many ideas this year. We've picked up on so many big issues. We've had so many contributions from so many different people across the board. And what we're absolutely delighted about today is that creative conversations are coming home, entirely appropriate for the week that the Euros start. Um, what we've got tonight is we've got people who are actually doing the job in our classrooms and in our schools who are going to talk about the practice that they've brought. And that's hugely challenging. It takes a lot of courage, I think, to present to your peers. And I had terrible trouble with that when I was a deputy head, particularly. I was forever trying to get people to share good practice. And every time I'd ask them and say, well, I don't think I'm doing anything that special, really. And people would just kind of brush it off. And there's a classic Scottish thing about that, isn't there? That you don't want to kind of stand up and be counted. We once did an exercise with teachers where they assessed themselves in something like 15 categories, and nobody gave themselves 15 very goods. One day we got a woman who gave herself 5, and nobody would have their lunch with her. She was kind of treated with somewhat of suspicion throughout the day, as if she surely thinks a lot of herself, 5 very goods. And that's what we need to get over. We need to get over that sense that we are apologetic about what we do, because the contributions that you've made, not just the presenters, but the participants, people in the audience today, the contributions that you've made this year have gone beyond anything that we've got any right to have expected from you. And this has been an incredible year of topsy-turviness, of upset, of disruption, of sudden changes. It's been like the hokey cokey. You never know where you're going. You never know what's coming in. You never know what's coming out. And you've coped with that. And I think given children, families, and communities far more, as I said, than anyone had any right to expect. And you all have to be congratulated from that. But we're really pleased tonight that we've got these 4 contributors. And the first one up is Carolyn McKenna from Clovenstone Primary School. And I have to say, I love it when I meet people like Carolyn, which I did on Monday online. And there's something really special when you encounter somebody that's got that degree of enthusiasm, that degree of energy, that degree of commitment to the children and young people in our care. And it's like a recharge button for me. Every time I have that experience and every time I meet someone like Carolyn, it just gives me so much more faith in the future. And that's what we need to do. We need to highlight all of the time the kind of quality that we've got in our classrooms. We obsess with statistics, we obsess with PISA scores, pizza scores, that's the domino effect. But what we do is what we should do rather is we need to focus on the best of what we do and try and make that the norm. And I'm not going to embarrass Caroline by suggesting that she's absolutely the best at what we do, but I was hugely impressed, Caroline, with what you had to say and what you spoke about when we had the previous discussion on Monday. So I'm absolutely delighted now to pass over and to welcome Carolyn McKenna from Clovenstone Primary School.
Okay, I'll jump on and immediately start and say that I'm horrendously embarrassed by such an introduction. But there we go, that's fine. Thanks so much for that introduction, David, and I'll get started. Charlotte is just lining up. I can see a PowerPoint. I've got mine here on the left, so it keeps me right. So we can get started whenever that jumps in, but you can see the first slide as it is. This is a very strange experience we spoke about this earlier, speaking to the void, but there are people listening, so I'll just go for it. So really, for me, where it all got started in terms of thinking about being creative in the classroom is that I was invited to attend one of these sessions, these creative conversations by Charlotte. Charlotte and I, who's one of the contributors here, worked together at Clovenstone Primary School last year and have stayed in touch, and she and I have been working alongside each other a bit this year on thinking of developing an IDL plan for creativity. For me, after attending our first the first session I attended for creativity, it really sparked off ideas about divergent thinking and about where to begin and the kind of what creativity looks like in the classroom. And for anyone that was at that session, it was brilliant. It really sparked off ideas with me. So I set about chatting with Charlotte, thinking about how I could plan for learning. What could I do to build on the creativity that I felt that I already had, which doesn't necessarily have to be applied in creative arts or subjects which are perhaps more obviously creative, which again could be art, music, places, subjects where it's made. I really appreciated hearing about creativity, thinking of creative thinking, and it sort of reminded me of things that I had been thinking about as a student a few years ago when I first started going into teaching, of that kind of what I wanted to inspire in the classroom. So I set about thinking about, I had my final term. This was sort of during COVID lockdown times, so I was looking ahead to my final term and thinking, right, let's create a plan that I could put creativity at the centre of it. So Charlotte and I had thought, well, if I put the progression, the creative progression, which had been shared, the 3 to 18, which there's a picture of here in the slide, at the sort of top of my planning, thinking about planning for an ideal topic, and then linking, if anything, sort of tagging on learning outcomes that I knew I had to cover. That's the topics or the areas of learning that I had to cover for the final term. So I thought if I could link that to creative skills, but really putting the skills of creativity, being curious, open-minded, problem solving and imaginative, putting that at the centre of my topic planning, and then seeing where I could apply it, if anything, sort of making that my topic. Creativity was our topic learning, to focus on that. So it was a bit of a burst of ideas, which meant that I kind of needed to sit down and type everything out, which I'm sure other people will find that they do when they start something new that they're excited about at the beginning. And I, as I say, put on the creativity top and looked at areas of learning that I hadn't covered. So I hadn't covered things such as some science, E's and O's I knew I needed to cover. I knew that I wanted to cover some learning alongside. There was some technology that I hadn't really looked at, and I thought, right, where can we put these together? And really by putting creativity as the link, as the theme. So Charlotte and I chatted about, and I know she has a science background, so we talked about the human body. I thought, right, what can we do to make that creative? So I got some ideas down, and I'll share them with you as we go on. So if Charlotte jumps onto the next slide, there we go. So in the classroom, basically day 1 or 2 of this current term, I used a few of the resources that had been shared from the creativity CLP that I'd attended. So on the slide you can see there's a spider assessment grid. So that assessment grid was made available to me through the CPD. I asked the children in my class to reflect on their own how they felt about creativity. So we'd had a conversation about the skills and what these meant that needed to be unpacked. I teach a primary 3-4, so for them we needed to unpack that. We talked about what it means to be creative, who's creative, when you might be creative and where you can be creative. And it was actually really great to hear, as it always is, from the children, their perspective on it. It didn't just go straight to creative writing or straight to art. It did actually, they needed, with a little encouragement, they saw where already they could think of things where people have to be creative. So there's a couple of examples there that I put on of different children in the class and how they felt. So you can see some maybe didn't feel particularly open-minded. We talked about how they could feel quite close-minded about things, and I used that as my base point to begin with for me to think, right, let's see what the children think with their creativity skills. Do they feel that they are on board with it? Do I think they're going to get it? The next thing was I gave them these sort of key words, which I had taken from the progression about being flexible, adapting, refining things. What does that mean? And I put them as being, again, a reference point. I wanted to embed that language as we went through this term, which I have been doing. And I have noticed, even just this past week alone, hearing children use words like, oh, they're refining something, they're being curious, they're adapting something. It's incredible, because that is something that, that's language that perhaps is not most naturally going to roll off their tongue on a day-to-day basis anyway, but they're not doing it to be token. It is that they're making those connections. So I really have felt that even after one term of focusing at these creative skills, the children are seeing that these are words that they understand in terms of across the curricular, where they can adapt and refine in particular. So I put that language at the beginning, thought about who, what, where, why, and when, and I used this at the initial sort of self-assessment. We also did a creativity task, which again, I had been shown in the CLPL. I thought it worked for me, so it'll work for them. One of these activities where you give the children a set length of time and blank circles. You know, it's not a circle, it is a, what is it? And yeah, naturally you can see in the classroom which children find that it is a circle, Miss McKenna, that's all it is, or it's a face, and they weren't willing to maybe perhaps be so divergent in their thinking. And I'm going to use that same activity this week coming as a sort of finishing off assessment to see any progression there. It's a really nice tool to use. Same with the spider diagram. I believe I'll be using that again, just to see if they reflect on it and how we get on. So I thought, looked at assessment tools, and as you can see, that's just a little snapshot of my learning wall that I've been cobbling together. It's definitely a work in progress with these sort of things, but I have really enjoyed, again, referencing back to you know, the creativity skills at the centre. I'll let Charlotte jump on to the next slide as I do the same. So we started off thinking about the human body. It's quite a common area of learning for the children at this stage, primary 4, primary 5. So I thought I would do something a bit different with it, and Charlotte and I chatted about looking at the cells. Now that's something that is so abstract to the children, but also kind of way beyond perhaps their learning or concept of what a human cell is. But it was a nice way to do a sort of topic reveal. So we were looking at science. We were going to be looking at the human body, but I wanted to almost like go really close into it. A topic reveal, we're looking at cells. Cells will give us a clue about what we're going to be finding out about. And as you can see here, we did a See, Think, Wonder task about some pictures of cells under slides. It was a really rich conversation that was had around this, you know, what this was, what was all about, and the children then created these artworks here with wax and watercolor, their own production to design a cell piece of artwork, and that was their way of kind of thinking about the body and what was inside themselves, and that they had cells within them, and that sort of bigger picture, a bit zoomed on in. So it was a way for me to, as I've said before, tack on the learning initially about the human body, but really we weren't talking about that yet. We were going to, through this, I found out what they already maybe knew, words they could talk about, had they heard of this before, and so on and so forth. It was almost like using a sort of higher concept for them to engage in their learning to begin with, and then pulling it back to first level areas of outcome. So I'll jump on to the next slide. Another example of sort of something that we did a piece of writing. So actually, this is a really nice thing, and it's just sort of there at the top as well. I got them to, before I started teaching them about the human body, introducing the body organs. So the learning was to learn about the different organs of the human body. We did a piece of writing. I put myself into the introduction. You know, you're inside Miss McKenna's body. She swallowed you. What's it like? What's happening? And some very amusing scenarios were coming out of that. I think by putting myself in it, it kind of made it more you know, funny, and you know, can I say, Miss McKenna, that your breath smells? And I was like, yeah, I won't take it personal. And it gave everyone a chance to write, and we watched a little video clip of just a little introduction, a cartoon, but it was enough to really get them going. It's probably the most enthusiastic of writing I've seen them all year, and it was fun, and it gave them an idea. They could use the terminology, they could use liver, lungs, learn about the organs and their place, but it wasn't about that. It was really about getting them engaged and thinking about it, using what they already knew. You know, it didn't matter if they said that they could climb from my stomach to my brain. They got an idea of where things were, and for me that was more important as a starting off point for thinking about the human body. We then went on and did tasks later from that in our learning about positioning of organs, and it was fantastic. It was really fun to play around with that and to have this as a starting point. There's a little post-it in the top corner picture there. I can just about see it on my screen, where as you can see that I've done coloured dots. So these link to the initial progression that we had at the beginning, and that stays on my wall. So the red being, you know, were we being curious? Were we being imaginative? For orange, were we problem solving? Were we applying our creativity? There's also being open-minded, and the children quite likely said they weren't being that open-minded because I had told them what to write about, so they didn't get a choice. So I had to just go with it. But it was wonderful to use that, and we've done that. We do that most days with a task. We can think, were we being curious? You know, were we doing that? I have found that, as it often can be, it could be a bit of a tick exercise. So I've started stopping and saying, well, okay, you think we're being curious when? Can you tell me when we were being curious? And they're definitely now, at the start, they were able to say, oh, well, because we were curious about this. But I'm starting to see them give me a bit more of an articulated answer about that, which is super. It's really lovely to see it working and getting them reasoning and getting people feedback in that way linked to the creativity skills. Jump down to the next slide. So what I've done here, so this is just giving you a little snapshot of the kind of thing I did for my topic plan. Again, it's a work in progress, and it was very much a cobbled together situation, but it really is, I sort of put the framework at the top and then thought about opportunities for assessment. As you can see, it's not completely filled in. It's things where I think, how could we assess? It's definitely something that assessing creativity is something that isn't is perhaps not as obvious or evident of how to do so, or it's definitely been part of my thinking of how can I assess that they're learning without saying they've got to do a certain thing or have got to produce something in particular, but definitely using spider diagram for their own self-assessment by using coloured dots throughout the whole learning. I'm getting a kind of idea of what they're taking on board. Creativity challenges, I think I'd do a little bit more of them if I was to do this again. But what I did was I looked at the learning. As you can see, I planned too much for a term, as we so often do in education. We plan too much. We have so many ideas. We want to get it all covered. But if I'm realistic, I probably have covered 3/4 of what I wanted to get done. I'm pretty happy with that. And I really have found that because the focus was creativity, it doesn't matter if we didn't get on to that idea I had for technology, you know, making things out of sticks and stones. But it doesn't quite matter. We will have covered it somewhere else, and I feel confident that's fine. If that E&O didn't get ticked off as well as I want it to be, it isn't really about that for this focus for myself. It was more about the quality and the rich kind of learning that we could have, focusing on our skills and applying that across the board, not just in creative subjects. So for me, looking at this myself, even at the end of almost at the end of term, yeah, 3/4 of the learning that I had wanted to cover, I feel confident that I have, and I really I've seen a sort of benefit there with focus on creativity. I'll just jump down to the next slide where I talk a little bit about assessment, and then I sort of give you a bit of an overview of how I feel at the end. So I used, as I've mentioned, the spider diagram there. I've used a little sort of very simple post-it with linking it to the dots, getting the children to tell me. I'll write those things down. Charlotte had given me an idea about using an exit ticket, but instead of saying something that they did well, it's about, if we're looking at refining our skills, then I think about something that they've failed on. So without making it individual, I find it's quite an early, well, children can be very negative about, I was rubbish at that. So if we did a group activity, you know, what one thing in the class that we didn't feel worked as well, next time what will we try? And it's usually focusing on a skill, what could we adapt for next time? So that's a really nice tool to use in the classroom. Something that I probably could use could use it across the board in different curricular areas. It doesn't have to be focused on things linked to creativity. It's definitely something I could use as well, but found that that's been great. And then I'll just jump down to the final 2 slides. In terms of collaboration, I haven't worked alone this year. I've got a stage partner, a primary 3 teacher. He and I decided to work together on this. So I came up with the initial planning, but it's been brilliant to collaborate with him and share, one, the workload, to share the ideas. It's an awful long, you know, it's an awful lot to be creative when you're tired and getting things coming at you from all angles and things changing and COVID having its own impact on school, have found that working, just having that conversation with the person next door and knowing that 2 or 3 times a week I've already got it planned with them and their ideas, not just my own. I've really enjoyed that process this term, which has been super. So that's this little snapshot of similar. Basically, we use the same plan, so it's how it's appeared in his classroom as well. I came along to I think it might have just been the last CLPL for thinking about learning, teaching, and process, and that was something that I found really a really nice sort of midway point for me to think, in that lessons or learning in school doesn't always have to be about learning and teaching and the process. Sometimes we're being creative learning, sometimes we've got creative teaching and creative process. But it was the focus on the process that I thought, right, that's what I want to do next. Let's have a learning experience in class, which is really looking at the creative process. So the next slide I'll show you in a moment is one where I focused on that. So we did a lesson on, well, the back point went from being human body, then we looked at inventions, and then we picked up on one particular invention and the human body, and being the invention of the fingerprint. But before we looked at fingerprinting by a Scottish inventor, to introduce that, I introduced it with this artwork. So this is Judith Braun. She's a contemporary artist who only uses, as you can see, abstract fingerprinting to create her artworks. So I shared images with the children, and I just think it's been fantastic, the outcome which we've had. It got them thinking about their finger, about uniqueness, about how theirs looks different, how their picture looks different. It was also a really nice way to work on the creative process, because the children could create something very quickly and be like, I'm done, Miss McKenna. And it didn't. Sometimes when you say, okay, can you try that again, you're met with a bit of resistance. But it really, some were doing, can I do it this way? Can I try it this way? I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to try it with my eyes closed. I'm going to try it here. You can see all the little yellow post-its there. That's their pupil kind of feedback. I could hear them saying these things, and it was getting their hands messy, and it was getting involved, and the creative process really came alive in this lesson. So it was wonderful to get that there. Now this could be linked to so many other things. We went on to then look at the invention of the fingerprint. We looked at identifying our own fingerprint. We looked at the patterns that are there, things that make us unique and make us different, and then we learned a little bit about the actual inventor. So it was great to kind of apply it there. I suppose on reflection at the end there, and thinking for myself, would be, I've jumped ahead a little bit, but I've put a slide in here. The next slide just shows you what we went to do next. So we then went on to look at our fingerprints. As you can see, this is a little bit of an example of the children telling me when they were curious, when they were finding out about what something was going to look like, when they were problem solving. And then I got a bit of people feedback there, which included a suggestion about doing something with clay. So the following day or two, I said, right, boys and girls, you gave me the feedback, your process that you think that it would be more effective to see your fingerprints using clay. Let's get the clay out. So we got the clay out, and it became another lesson leading from there, fingerprinting, but then we were using a different medium. And the next slide will just show you where that went. So we were writing about using our fingerprints, but then we took the clay outside. What kind of prints can we find in nature? And we kind of, the learning as it can do really just expanded from there. You could do so much more on this. And if I could do it all again, I think you can see, well, what more can we do? How else can I tag this learning further to next things? And sometimes you have the time to do that. But I know that these experiences that the children have had in the class are very memorable. They're very engaging. They have already referred back to. They can sometimes learning happens, and then a few weeks pass, and the children have forgotten that. It didn't really stick. And I found that by focusing on these creativity skills, it's been a real way of getting the learning to stick. The key learning that I want them to be there is there, but through the skills, that's the way that it's really embedded. It goes with being outdoors. It goes with using their bodies and their hands, and being creative physically as well. So yeah, on reflection at the end, which will be the final slide, pros and cons for me. I had to think about, huge pros in terms of pupil engagement, really, really brilliant for our final term to really sort of pull things apart. And there's been a huge variety. We managed to cover a wealth of learning across the curriculum. We're now looking at food technology this week. We've been looking at linking it with Spanish. We've been looking at all sorts of things, all creatively putting that at the centre. I would say perhaps it might feel a little bit bitty when I've looked at it this way, that you're perhaps only giving a light dusting of learning. So, you know, like anything, if I was to do it again, perhaps I would slow down the pace. I just had so many things I wanted to cover, and I wanted to see how much I could, you know, what they were interested in, what the children found more interesting, and what the children really didn't gel with, and go with it like that. And I suppose the next thing would be to look at creating an ideal plan which had more of a pupil input at the beginning, which is what I'd really done previously with learning. This time round, because it was sort of my thought that I wanted to kind of pull together, there could have been other things. So if I did this term 1, term 2, and perhaps I wanted to find out what the children wanted to know about, I could have then adapted it that way. But that's just how it goes, and that will definitely be something that I'm looking to think to do next term, and after the summer when we're all re-energized. But yeah, I kind of come to the end there. I've really enjoyed being completely inspired by coming along to these sessions, and I think it's evident in the learning, it's evident in I've immediately wanted to put it in place. I think the ideal plan that I've kind of created could be shared and whatnot with others. So yeah, that's me, and I'll pass it back to David or whoever.
Caroline, absolutely love that. And one of the things that I want to say straight off the bat is that it's not very often that you get a teacher prepared to sit down and talk through the strengths and weaknesses of what they've done in the way that you just have. I mean, that was just a brilliant object lesson, because what you didn't do was you didn't come out and say, well, this has been brilliant, this is something fantastic that I've done. You said, this is something I've tried, here are some of the things that went well, here are some of the things that didn't. And that quality of reflection, I think, is really helpful for other people. Your modesty was outstanding. There's so much that you did in that which chimed with me. There are 3 principles I talk about a lot. One is manageability, and you demonstrated that, because what you did was you said, I didn't get through everything that I'd originally intended to get through, but I got through the bits that mattered. And I thought that was really helpful for people in terms of thinking about workload. That idea, let's decide what matters, let's decide what's at the heart of what we're doing, and the other stuff can go. And I thought that was really useful. Second principle is coherence. And the way that you use those elements of creativity, the way that you used the spider diagram to link together everything that you did, it didn't come across as bitty at all, Carolyn. It didn't come across as bitty at all, because at the heart of it, there was that set of skills that you kept going back to continually. And I think that was a really great example of how we can make learning coherent, even when we're improvising and being creative. And the third principle that I talk about is consonance. And that's exactly what you've demonstrated, starting off with your ambition, which was to develop young people's creativity, their awareness, their capacity to think and apply, but then looking back to those elements that you're expected to cover, if you like, the E's and O's, and putting together that web that linked what you have to do with what you want to do. I think you demonstrated that really well. So thank you for that. And I'm delighted, Carolyn, that there's been lots of positive feedback on the chat. Could I also encourage people on the chat to put in any ideas that you've got, anything that you're doing that you would like to showcase while you've got the chance today. But before you get the chance to do that, we've got to move on. And next up, we've got Blair Minchin. He's half man, half legend. He's a kind of weird centaur. Blair's Twitter feed is an absolute thing of beauty and joy. It's full of creativity. He's on there today. He's playing his guitar. He's got some brilliant clips in it. He's got some great music in it. You can always get creative ideas. You can always get suggestions. And you can always, from Blair, get links to other accounts. Because like Carolyn, there's a lot of generosity built in. And essentially, at the heart of Blair's Twitter feed are the young people in his class. He refers to them often. He talks about impact. And I always go there and come away admiring his courage. But as I said about Carolyn at the start, I always come away energized, even though he's a pretty rude kind of guy, and he's been pretty impudent to me on a number of occasions. But I've decided just to make the best and forgive him for that. I'm also aware that he's got close to 2,000 slides coming up, and his cleaner's going to throw them out at 5:30. So genuinely, without any further ado, let's go with Mr. Minchin.
That's the best introduction I could ever have asked for. That was wonderful. Thank you, David. Cheers. Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity to speak here. It's a roller coaster year, isn't it? And we're almost there. I was going to speak today about my really about the Wednesdays. Every Wednesday in my class, I've been having like a special day. The kids have become really fond of them, and I'll be honest, there wasn't much pedagogical thought that really went into this so much. I just thought I was getting a primary 3 class. They'd missed a lot of primary 2. I had lots of stories from parents about how they really weren't coping well and that. So I just thought, you know what, I've got to do something here that like blows their mind. And I'm all about pupil voice, but I thought, no, I'm just going to take the lead, grab it by the horns, and then hopefully see where it goes. And whilst I was kind of thinking of that, I stumbled across the global goals, which I had vaguely heard of. And then I went on a 2-hour course with Lifta to kind of learn a bit more about them. And I thought, this is a bit of me. I don't know if the presentation's loading, Charlotte. I can't see it, sorry. Oh, look at that. There it is. And also just at this time, Disney Plus came out, and we were all locked in the house, weren't we? And needed something to do. And as teachers, you have the summer holidays, and I like to keep myself busy, like podcasting and stuff like this. But I started watching all my favorite Pixar movies again. And then there came this amazing show on Pixar, and I'll talk about that in a second. But if we go to the next slide, I think my when I kind of break it all down, what I've done, do you know, I've just realized you had to click loads, Charlotte, because I tried to make it all fancy and stuff. Sorry. So yeah, there's 3 aspects to my Wednesday practice, I guess. It's about immersive spaces. It's about global citizenship. I think that's the core of it as well. And it's also about a broad curriculum, really stretching and pushing the barriers of what it is. I treat the curriculum, frankly, CFE, like a play box, like a box of toys, just dip in and out of it. And as soon as the kids are interested in something, jump in again. So we go on to the next slide. I went to Disney just before kind of lockdown for the first time in Florida. And I was blown away, lifelong dream and all that to go. Never got to until I was in my 30s. And the thing was, as soon as you walked into Disney, the thing about it is, at least for me, maybe I didn't have a screaming child in a pram or something, so maybe the experience was different, but I was just hooked right away. And I was just so curious. The town, everything was just alive. The music, the lights, the people, everybody smiley as well in Disney. You're not allowed to be mean as a Disney member of staff. So I was just hooked. And I thought, you know what? And then on the plane back, I had so many memories, and I thought I had so many memories. That's the sort of memories that every child should have. And every child deserves to go to Disney. Other theme parks are available, I'm sure. But every child deserves that sort of thing. And I thought, would it be possible to do something like this in a classroom on a small scale? And so I started to think about that. And then if we go to the next slide, this show was on Disney Plus from Pixar. It's called Inside Pixar. And I learned an incredible thing from them. So they obviously make amazing movies, but they're known for, you know, really immersive, captivating movies, and they really tug at your heartstrings and you feel connected to the characters and the setting. Why is that? Well, they credit it with the fact that they don't do like, well, we're going to the next slide, what a typical movie would do, which, you know, is a backdrop and then the characters go in there and you film it and stuff. They don't do that. If we move on again, they build immersive environments. So they build the whole world. They drop the characters into it, and then they actually move cameras around the world. So like your Monsters Inc., they built the whole factory, and then the characters are moving through the factory, and it's amazing. And when you see it like in action as well, you're like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. And it grips you, doesn't it? And this picture of an art gallery too. I went to another one a couple of years ago down south. It was the Christian Dior exhibit. And again, it's immersive. And as soon as you walked in, your behavior changed. You were, I don't know, it was just the music, the sound, the lights, everything. And I know this to be true with kids as well. You see it when you have people come in, don't you, into your school to do maybe the odd assembly and that, and they just have something there, or they set up a thing, or you've taken your kids to the theatre, they're hooked. So I thought, you know what, I want to hook them, I want to blow them away. So I think the next couple of slides is just pictures of my classroom, what I've done. So I had a plane, we flew to the Arctic, but what you can't really see there is they walked through customs. And then when you went round, on the board was a plane flying, and then I had iPads set up as well, all the way along the tables. So it was like you were looking out the cockpit, and then we all took off together. And then camping too. But it wasn't just that. I found a wee thing you can get on Amazon which produces smells. So I had like campfire smoke smell going, and I've got the music as well, and the ambience of that, and the lighting as well, and just setting up. So the kids are walking in and they're like, oh, wow, we're here, we're transported somewhere. Now I think the next slides, again, I've done a bug's life. So it was an ant's nest, and they came in, and again, you can't quite see it, but to the left was a wee screening zone. So because at the moment, they come in between 10 to 9 and 9:15 at the moment, and they all come in dribs and drabs. So I need stuff to keep them entertained. So they came in a Bug's Life, wee cinema there, and they watched about an ant's nest, just a 3-minute video. I was like, good, you're good to go. Right, into the nest you go. So we had the Queen's lair, had them taking the food, the bricks back and forward and stuff, and a wee map, resting area, a lily pad, pond, all these sorts of things. Jurassic Park again, that was great coming in. Lots of microscopes and that for rocks, geology. I think there's another 2 of these slides to go. Sorry, Charlotte, I'm keeping you busy. I need to tip you at the end. Moana, again, had the seaside kind of a smell, the music, the waves and all that, and the boat, and lots of other activities, I should say, set up, which just can't see there. Christmas time, I did one every day in December and absolutely shattered myself, but they're all planned, so I can just roll them out every year. But my favourite one was the snowball fight, just coming in. And I didn't even say anything. I just said, go in and have fun. And the kids are coming in like, what? And that was it. And right away, they were throwing snowballs and that. And then the last 2, my favourite movie is Ratatouille. I love it. So this was imagine what it's like to be a rat, move kind of wee assault course thing. But I also had bread. We're chopping French bread, smelling herbs and stuff around the tables. And Big Hero 6, that was set up. So they were going to build the kind of San Francisco Bridge type thing. But again, it's the music, it's the lights, it's the smells, it's the feel, it's the activities, it's everything. So when they come in, that first half an hour of the morning, I'm just putting them in a zone, and they do it just automatically. You don't really, so long as it's all set up for them, it happens. So yeah, I think it would go on as well. And so that's kind of immersive environments. That's one part of it. Global citizenship is the next. I think it's such, with everything that's going on in the world, let's not bring up things like Brexit and Trump and everything that's going on. COVID even as well, bringing, the whole world, how all countries are dealing with it differently. It's just such a vital thing. And lockdown showing us as well, like I've done lectures in Mexico this year and just things that I never thought I'd do, just because suddenly people are online getting in touch in that. And I just know now where we're going in future, you won't need to move. I had to move from Dundee to Edinburgh when I first started in law. You won't need to do that in future because you can work mostly at home and just travel down one day a week or whatever. My partner she's an accountant, has already been told you don't need to come into the office ever again if you don't want to, which is mad, but she's saying I want to go in. So she's going in for a day a week, but that's it. So we're moving house in 2 weeks' time, but we had to find a house that had a proper office space for her. So we are now absolutely broke. But anyway, so global citizenship, why the Disney movies? Well, we go to the next slide. When you start to look at the Disney movies, you see that they come from all over. And this is an old one too. This doesn't even have, I think this is from 2016. So there's been movies released since that cover all aspects of the globe, and just what a great stimulus to say, right, how can we, how can we cover the curriculum and make a broad curriculum that covers all these different areas? So sorry, I'll stop waffling. Now I'm back on track. So this is where the global goals came in for me. And you know what? We talk about creativity skills, and we have a creativity coordinator in our school, Norrie Leonard. He's amazing. And so he had done a bit of work with us, and we did have the creative skills, open-mindedness, curiousness, problem solving. That. When I looked at the global goals, I thought, do you know what? They're P3 as well. I didn't want to overload them with too many colours and symbols and dots and whatever else, but it all fits into this. So like with your open-mindedness, gender equality, reduced inequalities, partnership, peace, justice, that kind of links into that. With curiousness, obviously your innovation and infrastructure, but also climate action, life below the water, life below the sea, life on land, being creative, problem solving, responsible consumption, which we changed to recycling, kids could understand, but still climate action, so many of these things, and applying their work creatively as well. Decent work came into that a lot. No hunger, we've set up a food bank collection point, but to do that, they were like, well, we need to make a video, we need to do these posters. We made QR codes, and when you clicked on the QR code in the school outside, so parents could flip up, there was a wee video of the kids. And then health and well-being too comes into so much of what we do, but we did a happiness topic as well, and that's about applying their skills creatively and then linking it to the global goals. So I feel it's difficult, and everybody does it a different way, don't they, in their class? You've got the ScotGov outcomes, you've got scenario, you've got all these things. I feel the global goals really bring it all together and help bring this kind of global classroom, if you like, to life. And if we just flick on to the next slide, I guess I've got this display in school. I took this after the first week. I don't know if you can kind of see it behind me. Maybe you can just make out there's been loads added to it. But every day, every Wednesday at the end of the day, I say, right, what global goals did we cover? And the kids make all the links, and we've drawn all over it with post-it notes and that. And my library as well, my bookcase, the kids were like, well, we should get books in the book corner that link to the global goals. So spent a ton of money this year, about 100 quid on books. But again, they all link to different global goals. I had the kids looking on the Amazon store for books and stuff, and it was just wonderful. What a way to get the kids totally involved. We ended up, as well, I should say. So we ended up from it all making a global goals poetry book as well. And the kids all wrote a poem about a different goal. And we looked at different styles of poetry in that as well. And so we looked at different kind of artworks. That's pointillism and their poem. And so that sits in the class too. So that's just lovely. I'm rushing because I want to get to the good stuff here. And the global goal thing. So, linking it to Scotland, and we did a military tattoo, and Brave was great there. But also I found this great clip on YouTube, the Hindu wedding. And I thought, that's ace. That's amazing. And so we followed the couple through the day. So at the start of the day, it was her getting her henna and everything and preparing with all the women and that. And then we went to the actual wedding ceremony, and then the food after, and cooking it, and the dancing. And I've probably done something quite rude there, sorry. It was on the dance video. The guy was actually saying, screw the light bulb with what they do. So anyway, it's a wonderful way though to, bring the globe into the classroom. So I think the final thing is the broad curriculum, making it broad. This was the first day I did, and you can see it's actually quite basic compared to what I do now. This was Cars, the movie. And if you flick onto the next slide, here's my plan for the day. Okay, I'd actually made slides and a bit more to it, and it did link to my forward plans as well. But you can see it was kind of like read a scale, make a racing team. It was fun. I did say, right, we're going to bring my car. I drove my car into the playground, and we were all looking in the bonnet and everything, and it was fun. But it was very, very tenuous links to the global goals, just to kind of get them into it, and then we kind of flick on a few. I don't know why I included these actually, but I just little things like, so getting kids to look at a car onto the next. Sorry, Charlotte. You're working overtime for me. So it was just things like, what can you see in the car? And the kids were picking out the gear stick, the steering wheel, that's what you call it. And I said, so where would you need to know number and counting in the tens and twos and things? So then next slide, they picked out the speedometer, and then I did lots of learning with that. So I think there's just 2 slides we can fly through, like just working with the speedometer and reading scale and things. So it's just finding ways to link it. I think there's one more slide. Sorry. Why is that in there? Never mind. However, here we go. Right, so after about a term of doing this and seeing that the kids were so engaged with the global goals and they were picking up on everything constantly, anything we did. I showed a video of a band playing, the Killers playing at Glastonbury just for a thing on a Friday. One of them was like, that's not gender equality because there's all boys in the band. So they were just, constantly everywhere. Mr. Minchin, we need to do more about recycling. Mr. Minchin, the milk cartons on the floor. Why is it in plastic? So my plans have really developed. And for primary 3, the sort of issues that we're discussing now are just wonderful. And I thought I'll quickly take you very quickly through just one lesson of this Moana Day, which was looking at tattoos. And I think as well, I had been really boring and I was linking all this PowerPoint to Hygieus and the challenge questions, but I'm not going to do that because it's 2 weeks till the end of term. We don't have time for that. Anyway, but in Hygieus is talking about, the curriculum needs to be opportunities to explore diversity and multi-faith issues and all that. So I thought Moana, Dwayne The Rock Johnson's in Moana and he's got all his tattoos on. And so I thought we'd look at tattoos from the Pacific Islands and what they mean. So we go on to the next slide. So this was how it was kind of introduced to the kids. We're talking about, there wasn't a lot of written language in Polynesian societies. And so people expressed, their lineage, their culture, their identity through these tattoos. And how it was actually banned at one stage, but it's now made a wee renaissance. And if we go through the next slide, this is The Rock, and we were looking at his tattoos. And we looked at Maui in the film as well. I said, how many tattoos can you spot on him? And if we go into the next one, then it was saying, the position of the tattoo has meaning on the body. Why? So lots of chat about that. Why your head? Why is that wisdom? And for 6 and 7-year-olds, that it does take quite a bit of thought. All of them. I didn't include number 3. What's number 3? What's number 3? And I went, oh well, actually, it's for life. And one of the kids was like, is that because you make new life in that bit? And I was like, yes, it is, and we'll cover that at a later date. Anyway, moving on, and that's what we can do, Charlotte, too. So we moved on. So we looked at what some different tattoos meant, and then the kids had to go. They actually got the stick and the black paint, and that's, sorry, I don't have any pictures of what they did. Stick with the black paint, hammering in onto a piece of foam, their tattoos. And I love the tiki as well, because in Polynesian societies, I learned they were similar to, I guess, Islam as well, in that there's not a belief of what God actually looks like, so they look different to everybody. So your spirit guardian is unique to you, and you can kind of design your own. So the kids loved doing that as well, which was great. And then if we move on, though, to kind of, we were looking at Mr. Morgan and his comments about tattoos and how he'd never hire someone with tattoos, and that was our tattooed head teacher there too. So it was great to link, all that kind of culture in that back, and the kids saying, well, it might mean an awful lot to somebody. That's how they express their identity and that, and it's just wonderful learning again at that age. And then I think the last slide I got here is again looking and saying that this is a counsellor in Samoa, and that's a traditional tattoo, and what a beautiful thing it is. And the kids as well were all saying, oh, she's so pretty. And I just thought that's wonderful, actually, because I don't know if I'd shown that at the start of the lesson, if they would have said that, but because they had an understanding. And then they were looking at it saying, that's a tiki, and I can see the waves because that's around Samoa. And yeah, just wonderful as well. So just great. And then just on Wednesday, I did School of Rock. I think David was mentioning me playing my guitar. Sorry if you happen to see me online playing my guitar and singing. But again, so we linked that, next slide, sorry, Charlotte, to Pride Month. So we wrote a lovely song all about acceptance and that. And then again, if we move on, we were looking at the beginning of rock and roll. So they're learning to play guitar on the iPad. We're looking at Chuck Berry and how he couldn't play. He had this wonderful song and people were tapping their fingers, but we watched the crowd in the background, all white sitting there, and how he wasn't allowed to perform in many venues as well. But that music was something that broke it down. And then we were also looking, again, the Killers, they're all boys. So we looked at time and and gender and music and how it's portrayed and things. And so I think final slide. So those, here we go. I'm going to try and piece this all together in 1 minute. Immersive Spaces, Global Citizenship, a broad curriculum. What's it done for my kids? It's their curiosity is boundless. It really is. They ask such difficult questions, but it's wonderful. They link all their learning, anything they do now, to those global goals. Whether I'm like, at the end of the day, right, see you later, Mr. Minchin, yeah. When we were doing maths, did that link to, which is just wonderful. And the ideas as well that they now have. And I think they've got we do one every Wednesday and it's just slotted in. And I've still been able to do topics as well, but they know that Wednesday is just a one-off day. But the literacy and the maths do link to my forward plans. The science as well, I've been able to link through it. So there is coherence to it. And I think, genuinely, at the start of the year, my guys were quiet. But if we go into the final slide, I think I've got maybe 10 in my class, potential Thornbergs there, who have just, they're wee superstars. They're wee pockets of dynamite, my kids. I'm very lucky. But I credit it all to these goals and to just going for it, frankly. And I think that's what creativity is all about, giving it a go. Some things have gone wrong, but yeah, I think that's my time, David. So I'll stop chatting. Apologies.
Thank you. So Amy Gibson asking, did the pupils feel inspired to want to set up their own environments? And did they give you any ideas for the setup? Or was it all your own creativity?
Do you know, I really should have included that. So at the end of term 1, just before October, I gave them a sheet. It had the global goals at the top and a big box underneath. And I said, have you got an idea for a day you'd like to do, or a movie or whatever? And then how would it link to the global goals? So lots of them came off of that. Loads. We've done a Minecraft day. Ratatouille was a big one that they wanted to do. Shrek, Bug's Life, Finding Nemo. So all these movies were what they wanted to do, and then I ended up going off there. Basically, I showed them the ropes, frankly. This is how you do it, and then said, you tell me what we should be doing. But the ideas they had for lessons were just astounding. One I didn't get to do was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but that was great. They wanted to, one girl said she wanted to look at how chocolate was made, but not only that, where does it come from? Do people who make it get paid a fair wage? Because if they're in Africa or Brazil, and already you could see, the thinking, and for a 7-year-old to say, do they get paid enough? I just thought, and when I spoke to her, she was like, well, because, it's sold here, and the people who run Cadbury don't live in Africa. And I just thought, well, that's, yeah, you're putting this together already. So, yeah.
I mean, absolutely brilliant. And I mean, you're going to be shocked by 2 comparisons I'm about to make. The first is that I've described you on the chat line as human Prosecco, because that absolutely what you are. It's just, it's the bubbles, it's the zing, it's everything. It's fantastic. So a comparison with a cheap Italian wine, which I think is pretty fair.
It's a Primark shirt, don't worry.
The other really interesting comparison, and this will be more of a surprise to you, is with Gordon Brown. I watched Gordon Brown last night in conversation. Gordon Brown's got a book out about 7 ideas to change the world, and he spoke incredibly well about it. But what he put at the heart of everything he did across the 7 challenges and the 7 changes was the importance of education. And what you're talking about in terms of giving young people a sense of themselves, a sense of their rights, a sense of justice, a sense of fairness. I mean, that is huge. And I had to keep reminding myself that you're talking about that in terms of primary 3 youngsters. And so many people would just back off from that. But I love the way that you've translated that into the wider learning as well. So again, just brilliant, high energy, tremendous content, Blair. And I think the most common comment in the chat was, why am I no longer young enough to be in his class? And it's that blending that you've done of the old school, kind of 1970s curriculum. Let's just pick a theme and bring it on. But you've really built around that the technology that's now available to make that real for kids, to give it a real sense of concreteness. And you've also allied it, I think, to a real sense of what is it they need to know. So brilliant, exactly what we're looking for. So again, thanks, Blair. And I think we've managed that for your cleaner, chucks you out.
Do you know, she popped in the door halfway through and was like, I was like, don't worry, I will.
Anyway, thanks again, and moving rapidly on, we will be sharing the slides, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted that we've got Joshua Martin from Belbaxter High School in Fife with us. He's clearly not in Belbaxter at the moment, unless they've got a conservatory, so that's good to know and to see. Josh is an absolute pearl beyond price as well. Because what we've got in Josh someone who confounds expectations and challenges stereotypes. I had a conversation with him this week in preparation for today and was really excited and thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. He's a business studies teacher. But he's light years away from any business studies teacher that I had when I was a pupil. I mean, admittedly, that was before the typewriter, but you know, we didn't have anybody that spoke about learning and education in our business studies classes in the way that Josh did. And even many of the colleagues that I had as business studies teachers, when I was teaching myself, I mean, the thinking around that has moved on so much. And that was just brilliant. It was just brilliant to get that kind of challenge and to realise that any subject in the curriculum can be a springboard for change and for development. And all it takes is a bit of thought and a bit of imagination. What I think Josh has done particularly well, along with his colleagues, is really open up the curriculum and look at it in different ways. But I think alongside that, what he's also done is he's managed to make links across a whole range of priorities, which we too often see as separate demands on us. And there are lots of links around creativity and employability and lots of echoes of things we've talked about earlier on this year. So yet again, an absolute pleasure to welcome Josh and pass over to you now.
David, I'm going to get you to introduce me everywhere, please, because that was absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you for having me today. It is an honour to have the opportunity to share a lot of the hard work, not just my work, but the work of the entire team at Belbaxter in trying to push forward the creativity agenda. Before I kind of push forward too far, actually, it was something that David, you said earlier, and I think it's come up a couple of times about, you know, we're also focused at the moment on evidence and kind of statistics, and I think you'd mentioned about PISA scores as well, and that chimed really nicely with me because you know, I'm quite new into teaching. I think this is my third or fourth year as a teacher, but I think in a lot of ways we're missing the mark. This is the kind of thing that we need to be focused on if we're going to set our young people up for life beyond the classroom, and it's, I think, again, a brilliant opportunity to see you know, the work and hear about the work, certainly in the primary setting, which I don't have a kind of a lot of a connection to. So it's really nice to hear from primary colleagues. As David said, yeah, my name's Josh Martin. I'm a principal teacher of business skills and enterprise at Belbaxter High School. It's a temporary position that I entered into in 2019. It's coming to an end. I'm actually going to be leaving Belbaxter shortly. I'm a business teacher by trade. And my current remit really focuses on, or it kind of originally focused on, developing the language of skills across the school community to empower pupils to ensure that they're confident in their articulation of skills for life beyond the classroom, and importantly, the ability in exercising and reflecting upon those skills as well. As the years of the 2 years has gone on, my job's evolved. I've taken on a real interest in developing creative skills within the classroom, and also trying to shift that creative responsibility, which certainly in my setting, a lot of young people, a lot of parents, teachers as well, assumed that kind of the creative responsibility was for the traditional creative subjects like art, like drama, like music. And I think a lot of secondary schools are guilty of that. Though I know, and that's of course not all, and I know a lot of schools are making really big strides in shifting that creativity and embedding it across the curriculum. To kind of just come back round actually to that first point I made there, one of the things for me with the creative agenda is we are so focused on, certainly in high school, we're really focused on that end result, the exam, the grade. We're focused on the assessments, on the reports, and we forget about the importance that creativity plays within the classroom. And that's become the kind of the focus of my position over the last year or so. I've got up just there. Thank you, Charlotte, for putting that up. The just a few of the kind of the bits that I'm going to be touching on that we've some of the work that we've been doing at Bell Baxter, and I'm really excited to be sharing some of this work with you today. It's going to be a fairly quick whistle-stop tour. If you have any questions at all, please pop them in the chat. I'll try and get back to you as quickly as I can. I'll also leave my email address at the end, so feel free to pop me an email. If I could get you to just move on, please, Charlotte. Thank you very much. So my role here at Bell Baxter, it started by developing a skills framework. That was kind of the primary remit when I started. That's where the creative discussion was relit and encouraged new ventures from there. Originally, we got round the table, this was just before COVID hit. We got round the table with employers, with teachers, with higher further educational institutions, parents, pupils, a variety of other stakeholders. We got around the table and we actually fleshed out, right, what do young people need to, the skills do they need for life beyond the classroom, be that in education, be that in the workforce. And it was from there we realised that we weren't quite hitting the mark with regards to the creative skills. And also it really highlighted the new emerging creative industries that look like they're going to start to kind of dominate a lot of the UK in coming years, if not already. And again, that kind of consideration of how do we best prepare our young people for these new jobs as they're coming up, and not just within creative industries as well. Also that kind of that realization that these creative skills, the open-mindedness, the imagination, the problem solving, the curiosity, they fit in all walks of life. And it was again about moving away from those traditional creative subjects and trying to embed this everywhere in our school and to kind of open up young people's minds to the importance of these skills. The skills framework that I've put on the slide there, that'll change, that will evolve over time. These are the kind of the core, the key headings for the different skills that we think young people require. You'll notice there isn't a dedicated heading there for creative skills. Those kind of blend in with a lot of the other skills, and they fit into almost all of the different areas there, all of our skill sets, as we call them. The idea of embedding, at the beginning of every lesson at Bell Baxter, there's an expectation, I don't know whether it's been happening during COVID times, but there's an expectation that at the beginning of the lesson, the teacher will introduce the learning intentions, the success criteria, and they'll also provide a skill. They'll tell the young people, these are the skills that we're going to be developing, and have that discussion of how does this fit in to your learning? How does this fit in to future life as well? And like I said, it was through these discussions we realised we weren't quite hitting the mark. We weren't embedding the creativity to the degree that we wanted, and that's kind of that then stemmed off into the following projects. So if I can ask for the slide to move on, please. Thank you very much. So as my remit evolved, I took upon responsibility for developing and deploying a new S1, S2 Creativity and Enterprise course. And it's become very much the centrepiece to a lot of the creative work at Bell Baxter. And I'm very proud of the work that we've put into this. This was to provide us with the opportunity to embed those skills in line with the career education standard, the developing the young workforce agenda and so on. We put in place different methods of tracking skills, of assessing skills, and also the opportunity for young people to actually develop their understanding of creative skills. And I thought it was really nice what Carolyn said about, again, what she's been doing in the classroom, actually getting young people to understand what does it mean to be open-minded, what does it mean to be using your imagination, because a lot of the young people that we were teaching in S1 and S2 and even up the school, they didn't have that understanding. So hopefully, as time goes on, and we're practitioners like yourself, Carolyn, that'll start to come through into the secondary setting. But at the moment, we felt we had to kind of start from the ground up and introduce those skills and get the young people articulating them. And also importantly, getting teachers to understand the importance of these skills and how they fit into their curricular areas. So what we did as part of the Creativity and Enterprise course, we kind of totally spiced things up. We business teachers and drama teachers were tasked to work together, which any of my secondary colleagues here will know is a fairly unusual mix of teachers. But what we were able to produce was an incredibly rich, incredibly fruitful course that we've been delivering over the last year. So I'm just looking at what my notes. Oh, sorry, before you move on. Thank you. What did I say here? So we were able to work together with the drama team to draw out on their talents, the ideas, the different subject knowledge to form this rich, engaging course. And what's been brilliant is it's evolved into a very kind of very productive interdisciplinary course, which is normally very difficult in secondary settings to get right, but we've managed, drawing on the skills from the drama teachers and the expressive arts department, and also kind of the business skills, the administrative, the accounting knowledge, all put together. It's not an ad hoc course, it's not a mismatch, it's something that's been really pulled together well and polished, and young people are taking a lot from it, and they realise now how these creative skills fit into maybe the business world, fit into different industries. We've changed the way in which we're delivering it as well. For myself, like I said, I'm a business teacher. I'm quite used to, you know, a particular way of delivering my courses. It's moved me and my colleagues out of our comfort zones. We've had to try and do things slightly differently. But that's been brilliant. It's encouraged us to take ownership. It's encouraged us to try new things. A lot of things haven't worked, but again, in that spirit of creativity, you know, we've been brave. If it hasn't worked, we've got round to the table, and we've tried to change it. We've tried to improve upon it, and it's, like I said, it's been a real success. The young people have really enjoyed it, and the feedback that we're getting from delivering staff and parents and other stakeholders has been incredibly positive. Unfortunately, COVID's hampered a lot of what we wanted to do. We had some really good projects lined up. We were going to get our S1s to complete an enterprise project. They were all going to chip in £1. We were going to buy some resources for them, and then they were going to try and sell them at parents' evening. Unfortunately, we've not been able to do that this year, but hopefully next. Some of the projects that we have conducted are things like our board game design, which came from one of our drama teachers, and we brought in a big pile of resources. The young people had to go away, do some research and come up with the designs for a board game. They had to do the market research, which kind of stems in with the business side. They had to decide on pricing. They had to consider the importance of packaging, branding. But again, the overarching theme there was the creativity. The young people were given that freedom. They were given the space to do this and to kind of develop those skills, and then importantly reflect upon them at the end to see what they've developed, and the importance of that moving forward as well. If I can move on to the next slide, please. One of my favourite courses to deliver, and this has kind of come as a response to the creativity, the S1 and 2 creativity and enterprise course, has been the Young Enterprise programme, which I absolutely love. I did Young Enterprise when I was a pupil, and I took a lot from it. It's one of the reasons actually I became a teacher, because I wanted to keep doing it. Young Enterprise provides young people with the opportunity to set up their own private limited company. They have to do all of the decision making. They have to decide on director roles. They have to get the insurance. They have to register. They have to raise all the funds, buy, sell the products, do all the market research, the finance, everything, which is brilliant. So it's all about providing that context for the creativity. Again, it's maybe not what one would think of as a strictly creative course, but it is providing the young people with the opportunity to do things like the problem solving. This year, again, with COVID, it's brought up a hell of a lot of problems for everyone, including my young enterprise companies, and they were struggling at the beginning to raise the initial £100, which they have to pay Young Enterprise to get set up. But again, they had the space, the resources, the capacity to go away and do that problem solving themselves, to come up with different solutions around these problems, to be curious, to use their imagination when deciding on what products to sell and for their market research and so on. So it's been brilliant, you know, for me as a business teacher. It's brilliant to see the kind of the business skills coming through there, the application of business knowledge as well. But like I said, importantly, those creative skills are being developed there. As part of our Young Enterprise course this year, in the last couple of years, it's become an accredited course. It's now the same as a a higher qualification. So it's so the young people log on to a portal called Moodle, and they complete a variety of very small tasks, mainly kind of reflective tasks and showing that they've completed certain business activities. And then they get accreditation from Glasgow Kelvin College. So I'm very proud this year. Our whole cohort of about 20 pupils have gone through that process, and they'll all be awarded that qualification in the next couple of months. The young people also get the opportunity to complete a University of Strathclyde Business School exam, which is again a reflective piece, getting them to think about the different skills that they've been exercising, problems that they've faced, and also how have they worked around these problems, and what might they do in future, what might they have done given the opportunity in future to change these. And finally, to kind of add another string to the bow. Oh, sorry, Charlotte, if I can just go back to that last slide, please. Thank you. Finally, the other string to the bow of our Young Enterprise course is the SQA Leadership Award, which is my first time delivering, but again provides young people with the opportunity to develop their understanding of leadership. And what we've done at Bell Baxter is placed that real importance on the creative skills and how they fit in to being a successful leader. And we've looked at different leaders, both local, kind of our head teacher. We've looked at, global leaders, people like Joe Biden and Boris Johnson. And we've thought about, right, when would they have to be open-minded? When might they have to use their curiosity or their problem-solving skills? So we've been able to, again, tie that creativity right in there with the Leadership Award, and the young people are getting another qualification for that. It's at the same level as a higher. It's not the same weight, but it's certainly, again, a really strong CV builder. And sorry, I'll go on to the next slide, please, Charlotte. Thank you. Now, I'm not going to be at Bell Baxter to actually see the delivery of this, but one of our next steps in our creative journey is the delivery of the Creative Thinking Award, which we'll be starting to deliver in August when our timetable changes. Young people will have the opportunity to work on a variety of different projects put together by different organisations. The brilliant organisations like Lego are involved in this, and they've put together units of work. They've posed problems for the young people, and the young people have to work collaboratively and individually to come up with solutions to these problems. It's all internally assessed. It's offered at two different levels, level 5, the equivalent to a national 5, and level 6, the equivalent to a higher. Learners are encouraged to think differently, break the rules, fail, collaborate, come up with different and innovative solutions. But hopefully it won't be myself, but hopefully one of my colleagues will maybe be able to come back to a future creative conversation and share the successes around the Creative Thinking Award. And that's me. I'll go on to the last slide, please. Like I said, that's a whistle-stop tour. You have to excuse me being a bit all over the place there. If you've got any questions at all, please feel free to fire me an email. It's just up there. I'm at Bell Baxter for the next couple of weeks, albeit isolating at home at the moment. So I've got a bit more free time to reply to emails if anybody has any questions. I'm always happy to share resources if anyone's looking for anything. Thank you very much.
You were very far from being all over the place, Josh.
Thank you.
Absolutely frighteningly articulate. Real pleasure for me. This, I don't know if anybody can see it, but this comes from a piece of work that I was involved in the 1980s, where we did a unit called Mind Your Own Business, which was about young people getting into self-employment, and lots of echoes of that, including a business snakes and ladders game that we designed with some of the young people. So just brilliant to see these echoes coming back. But that whole capacity that you've shown to link certification and creativity together, a theme we've been trying to develop this year, absolutely brilliant. So thanks again, Josh, for that. I'm not going to thank you any more than that, although you deserve it, because I want to introduce our final contributor. And this is a huge, huge pleasure for me. Jodie Hannan, I first came across because we had a brilliant mutual friend, a teacher called Jill Gavin. And Jill could be really demanding, she could be really challenging, she had a tongue that could lacerate the thickest of hides when she chose to do it, and she was no stranger to making the odd criticism, particularly of managers and leaders, but she never did that with Jodie. She was always proud to introduce Jodie to me as someone that she considered not only to be a real support in the school and a real strength in terms of the school leadership, but also as a friend. So Jodie started off with proper high marks for me, because if you could make it with Jill, you could make it with anyone. I was even more delighted when Jodie moved on to take on the headship at Drummond in Edinburgh, which was a school that I'd done work with. And it's a really complex school in all sorts of ways, with lots of interesting challenges. And just as she'd met the challenges when she was in Dunfermline High School, I think she's really met them at Drummond. And I have a real sense of a legacy from Jodie's leadership in that school. What we wanted to do at the end of this conversation was to highlight the importance of leadership. If creativity isn't in the culture, then the risk is that Blair Minchin becomes a treat, and Carolyn McKenna becomes an anomaly. And what Josh demonstrated was that whole thing about how important it is for these things to be in the culture. And leadership gives the permissions and it creates the structures. And that's what Jodie's going to talk about. So for me, a massive welcome to Jodie Hannan.
Thanks, David. Thanks very much for the invitation to join everybody this afternoon. So Charlotte, yes, just moving on to the second slide, please. Thank you. And interesting, actually, sorry, could you go back to that one? It was interesting in terms of what David was saying at the introduction in terms of don't be apologetic for what you do, because actually the main theme of my conversation with David last Friday was, really, you want me to talk about creativity? I really don't think I have been at all. You know, we've introduced a few national performance awards or progression awards at level 5 and level 6, but that's what everybody's doing. Surely there must be other schools around the country who can give you more of what you're looking for that really fit the creativity brief. And then we had a bit more of a conversation, and I thought, right, okay, yeah, I can do that. I can talk about it from a headship and a leadership angle. And actually, just listening to Josh and Blair and Carolyn, I am wistfully remembering some of the best experiences I had as a classroom teacher, which was all about immersion, and creativity and thinking outside the box as a history teacher as well. And I very, very fondly remember my times as a history teacher as well. And it was lovely listening to all that creativity and really finding that inspiration here again. So just moving on one click, please. Okay, so we've come to the end of the session. Are we going to use the word unprecedented? We probably are. We could also probably use the word unsober at the end of this year as well, because it's been a corker of a year, hasn't it? And this is the last creative conversation that we're talking about. And the question, I suppose, is, how was it for you? One click, please, Charlotte. Was it, when you found out this time last year or just before, it was all Sound of Music? What's lockdown going to look like? It's going to be interesting. It's going to be exciting. Was it going to be the chance for more box sets and manicures? What was it actually going to look like, this whole working from home? I remember saying to my team in the staff room, when we were told that we were going into lockdown and nobody knew what it was going to look like, I remember saying to them, there's this thing called Teams. I recommend you look into it and start setting up your class teams. And how would we have ever known what all of that was going to evolve into? So in terms of the last sort of 15, 18 months as a leader, sometimes it has been, you know, the virtual school has been alive with the sound of creativity, people working from home, trying to keep a team together. Next click, please, Charlotte. And then we got into our groove and it was all very Saturday Night Fever. We knew where we were going. There was a flow. Everybody was working together. There was a real team and a dynamic around it, which was fantastic. And then one click, Charlotte, please. Sometimes it turned into Reservoir Dogs. And sometimes you could go from Saturday Night Fever to Reservoir Dogs within the space of a couple of minutes, depending on what you were actually looking like, what it was actually looking like. And it was such a challenging time for everybody. How do you keep a team together when you aren't in the same building? You know, when you're navigating, can you see my screen? And yes, I'm on mute and you're still on mute, etc., etc. With all the challenges that brings with it, and everybody really learning from scratch as we went along. But I think what was really important all the way through, and particularly as I prepare to leave Drummond in the next couple of weeks and take up post at Musselburgh, is going back to what is our why. Next slide, please, Charlotte. And for me, all the way through, from being a probationer 15 years ago at Tynecastle, all the way through the different career choices and the path that I have chosen in terms of becoming a head teacher, teaching has always been about what I feel, not necessarily just about what I do. And I have certainly changed my perspective as I've gone through. And I think it's something that's particularly true with secondary teachers, and I'd be interesting to hear, is that I have moved away from being a teacher of history, which absolutely anchored me at the beginning, to becoming much more of a teacher of children and starting to think about things much more holistically and going back to that why. And as I said, it is really thinking about, I come to the end of my first head teacher position, and thinking about taking the new school, and also leaving my old school, going back and revisiting, why do we do what we do? We've been through lockdown, we've been through blended learning. Have we lost, or did we lose sight at any point of our why? And was it just simply, we've got to get through teams, we've got to do this, let's just keep these decisions? It became very operational. But at the same time, creativity was absolutely flourishing. But we were thinking about all the time, what is the purpose of doing what we're doing? You know, we can't see these children, we know they're there. Why are we doing this, what we know is the most magnificent of jobs? And are we all doing it in lockdown for the same reasons? And we kept talking about teamwork because it became more important than it ever had been before. But what did the word team actually mean to all of us as we went through this most challenging of circumstances? And going back to the why and thinking about why we are doing this, why are we checking attendance? Why are we doing live lessons? Why are we setting these assignments? Why are we checking them? Why are we letting parents know, etc., etc., etc.? Things that were really easy in school just became 100 times more difficult when we were all working from home. And something that I have found quite alarming as we've sort of started getting back to some kind of normal is the amount of interviews I've held recently. And I ask this question in interviews. I said, tell me why you do this. What are your educational values? And the number of teachers, both NQTs and experienced teachers, who haven't been able to articulate their values and explain what their why is, why they do what they do, and how that shapes their teaching and relationships, has been really concerning. And that's something I've been thinking about over lockdown. And as I said, more recently, as I prepare to move schools as well. So lockdown paradoxically splintered our team in many ways, but at the same time, it very much strengthened our communities. So one of the first things, as I said, I'll be doing with my new community in Musselburgh is to reflect upon our why as we move into that new academic year. And I would always say, keep coming back to your why and keep finding the joy. Sometimes it was really difficult in lockdown, but you had to be able to find it. It's easy in a school because you can walk around the school. And walking as the school is good for your soul. I read that somewhere, I can't remember where, and it's absolutely true. But you have to try harder when you're working from home to be able to find those points of joy, because as a head teacher, sometimes you can be a bit more remote from the pupils because you're not always in the classes. You have to go into the corridors and find them, etc. And that becomes even more challenging when you're all working from home. Next slide, please, Charlotte. And this was something that Carolyn referred to. And this did actually make me laugh. I was walking around my office the other day. I was picking things off the pin board that I didn't need anymore. And I looked at it and I remember pinning that up. It must have been about 4 years ago, as if I pinned it up in my office, it would just happen, you know, pin it up and they will come kind of thing. And I looked at that. And I think that probably completely inadvertently and completely organically, simply because of everything we've been through, we're probably all, even, you know, primary fours, my son is in primary 4, probably all at senior phase level in terms of the creative skills that we have learned, and particularly adults as well. I think had I gone into Drummond a year into post and said, right, we all need to be more creative and this is what it looks like and this is the progression framework, that would have been a tough sell. But we have accomplished about 5 years of digital creativity and creativity skills in the way that we look at planning and pedagogy. I think then I could have been putting on an improvement plan for the past 10 years, and we've accomplished it in about 8 months. So it made me laugh in terms of the progression framework is there. And I thought Carolyn's use of it was really impressive, but slightly different in a secondary school. But now I should be able to tick off all those boxes, actually. And going back to the initial conversation I had with David last Friday, when I said, oh, I'm not really feeling very creative, you know, I'm absolutely knackered. I don't think I've done anything out of the blue. And I still think in a way that that's true, but I think that what I can talk about this afternoon, and coming at it from a different angle, is the hugely important role that a leader has to inspire and motivate and create the conditions for Carolyn and Josh and Blair to thrive, so that they don't become the odd ones out, so that every single child doesn't have to go through that teacher postcode lottery of, well, I hope I get Mr. Minchin because he does all this amazing stuff, but somebody next door to him doesn't. That's what John Hattie talks about as well. I think it is, isn't it? It's not really the differences and inconsistencies between schools. It can be the inconsistencies that are just between classrooms as well. So head teachers really have to ensure that we do have a creative approach to curriculum, pastoral support, learning and teaching, and it's the dogged determination. I think that I said that to David as well. I said, I'm not sure I can offer you many words of wisdom in terms of creativity, but what I can say is that my approach to trying to make sure that the culture inspires everybody to come to me with an idea is one of offering leadership opportunities, is that dogged determination to make sure that every single child in the school has the best possible experience. And I'm always supporting and encouraging and challenging staff to make sure that if it's not okay for my kids, then it's not okay for anybody else's as well. And so looking at the progression framework, as I said, I wonder where we would all measure ourselves in that framework. And that's why the absurdity of it, I suppose, made me laugh, that I pinned it up there 4 years ago, had never really looked at it. And it wasn't until the other day when I was thinking about this that I came across it again. And in this year, our creativity has been stretched to the limit and also beyond, with multiple and often conflicting demands of you have to have 50% of your BGE learners in no more than 30% of the time, but you can never exceed 8% of the school role at any one point that they can be in. It's just been the craziest game of educational Sudoku ever. But actually, we have flourished in this in so many areas, and people keep talking about the silver linings, and really there have been so many. I mentioned before about this little thing called Teams that I didn't know about 15 months ago. And now I think all the things I could have done differently way back had I known about Teams at that particular point. So yeah, head teachers really can only dream of the amount of staff improvement that could have been done had lockdown not catalyzed what we were looking for. So was there ever a year that we needed creativity more? No, possibly not. And it's really, really important that everything I think we've learned about education, the importance of teacher autonomy, the importance of teacher empowerment, and also ourselves as teachers and human beings and leaders, what's that going to look like if and when, and please God, COVID actually recedes? So that's something that I think as leaders, we're all thinking about. How do we harness everything that we have learned to make sure that it doesn't get lost as we start moving back into what, you know, feels like a bit more, simply because you're in a school, a more traditional framework. Next slide, please, Charlotte. And this has been brilliant. In the rare moment when I'm not reading Scottish Government health and safety guidelines, and when is a false positive on an LFD test, not false positive on an LFD test, I'm reading this. I love professional reading. It really nourishes me, and I take it into my staff body a lot. I came to it through Gavin Oates, actually. I participate in the Excellence in Headship Scale programme, and that's been an absolute lifeline in terms of keeping me motivated and inspired and seeing what else is out there as well. So I've actually bought a copy for all of my staff, and we have been using it at some of the integrated pupil support development days as well. You can see all the post-its poking out of the top. I'm only halfway through because then I did have to go back and read some more health and safety guidelines, unfortunately, but it's brilliant. It uses, as you can see there, the analogy of All Blacks. It talks about culture, ethos, teamwork, purpose, ownership, leadership, personal character, and humility, all the stuff that you want to be in your staff body and you want everybody to feel about teaching, and that you can't necessarily be taught. I've always thought that the Scottish Government initiative of saying, well, if you have a PhD in science or computing science, for example, those being the shortage subjects, that makes you eminently rather qualified to be a teacher. And it doesn't. You might know everything about the subject, but it goes back to that, the value of relationships and you wanting to work with young people and the passion that you feel. And you could be the most qualified academic in the world, but that doesn't actually make you necessarily qualified to do this most important of jobs. The legacy book also talks about what is the soul of the organization and gives you all these thought-provoking questions about how you achieve your why. And it's really interesting, and it's been lovely actually as we've been reading our way through this. You'll pass somebody, you say, oh, how are you getting on this morning? They say, oh, I'm sweeping the sheds. And that's all about ownership of what you're doing. And that's been brilliant. It's a bit of an in thing at the moment because not every single member of staff has got the book. My successor is going to be taking that out in August or September, I think. But read it, and I hope that you see what I mean in terms of it really getting you to think about your why. Oh, and by the way, number 6 of the All Blacks principles, I think, is the most important, but I'll leave it there with you to find that out for yourself. Next slide, please, Charlotte. I attended the last creative conversation on the lessons that Wales could teach us about the curriculum and completely agreed with the presenters there about the importance of having a really clear vision and values and living by them, making sure that they are your steer. And that's what we've been doing during lockdown as well. Although, as I said, I feel that maybe it's become a little bit fragmented simply because of all the demands of working from home, all the demands of the alternative certification model, etc., that secondaries are experiencing. So that's certainly something that I am going to be asking my successor, suggesting to her that she revisits with the Drummond staff in August, and that I will be talking through the Musselburgh staff as well to really try and get to know who they are, what they're about, and does our vision and do our values, do they steer us with what is best for our children? And I always say to staff when they come to me with a creative proposal, whether that's can I do Eco Club, or can I run rights respecting schools, or can I do Duke of Edinburgh, or can I go to the Water of Leith Conservation Trust with these pupils, whatever it might happen to be, the default is pretty much, yeah, it is. How does it support our vision? Tell me about the values and tell me about the impact it's going to have on the kids that you want to take. Because if you can't give me that rationale, then we can't go with it. If you can give me a really solid rationale and tell me how it's going to benefit these kids, tell me what you need. Tell me if it's the time or the money or the space or me sending an email or whatever it happens to be. I'm wholeheartedly behind you, but I have to see the impact, and there has to be rigor behind your proposal as well. And that came through really clearly from what Josh and Blair and Carolyn were saying as well. And I think that that's what I've been able to contribute to Drummond. I might not be teaching creatively in a classroom anymore, but my scope and my influence is much, much wider, because now my job, as I said before, is to make sure that I inspire and enthuse and motivate all my staff to make sure they're as creative as possible, but it has a definite impact in terms of confidence, or safeguarding, or curricular attainment or achievement, whatever it happens to be. It has to be tangible that way. So yeah, let's talk about your plans. Let's talk about the evaluation. Let's try. Yeah, it might be risky, it might fail, but then if so, we look at what worked, we look at what didn't, and then we move on from then as well. And it keeps coming back to the why, the vision, and the values. So it's staff empowerment, but absolutely with staff accountability as well. Next slide, please, Charlotte. Yeah, it's completely true, isn't it? Culture absolutely eats strategy for breakfast. And I have found this out. I have made lots of mistakes over my headship where I had the best plans. I thought they were amazing, but maybe my rationale wasn't strong enough. I was maybe too impatient. I'm quite an impatient person. And maybe I was trying to do too much at once. I think maybe often you do that when it's your first headship as well. You have to get the culture right. It has to be in the right place and going in the right direction. Otherwise, the most amazing strategy will absolutely dissolve. It's like when you're a classroom teacher, you might have the best lesson plan, but unless you've got behavior management and you've got the pupils with you, it doesn't really matter what you've planned. So working from home was massively challenging in terms of how do you keep that culture going when you're not seeing everybody, when you're not having these micro interactions every single day in the corridor, in the canteen, you know, in and out of the toilets, whatever it might happen to be? How do you keep the culture of teamwork and the culture of, yes, we can, and I know it's tough, but yeah, we can absolutely do this when you're not in the same building? Lockdown was really challenging personally and professionally for everybody. I don't know if it was just me whose children ate custard for breakfast and sort of turned totally into Mowgli, stopped wearing clothes and ran barefoot through the fields. And you would be having Teams meetings with your colleagues, and kind of the same thing was happening with them. And but it did build up a sense of community at the same time. Sometimes you felt it slipping, but because you literally were all in that boat together, it did give you that sense of shared purpose. But lockdown challenged my leadership in many ways, as well as affirming it in many other ways as well. And it was also clear during lockdown, and then moving into blended learning, and then thank goodness moving back into 100% of us being in the building 100% of the time, that lots of the green shoots of creativity had absolutely flourished. Not necessarily just digitally either, but maybe people's confidence and trying out different pedagogical styles, thinking about feedback, etc. But then other green shoots I thought were there had wilted. And that also became more and more apparent. So really, for me, August is a time for regrouping, refocusing, thinking about our why, and asking colleagues, what did you think about our culture and our teamwork? Did teamwork mean the same thing to you that I thought it meant? Let's have a conversation about that, because I'm thinking about the analogy of legacy, where it talks about Maori analogies as well. It's talking about teamwork is when everybody knows that all their spears are pointing in the right direction. Because I can use the word team, but I might be thinking over there, whereas my colleague next door could be thinking that it's over there as well. So this has all really crystallized where I think I'm going to be going in August, even though I'm going to be in a different school. So for me, it's going to be really important to have that conversation with everybody, with pupils, with families, and also with parents. And then we think about how we move forward. Next slide, please. So for me, creativity isn't just one thing, it comes from lots. And I do like a graphic, actually. I do like a jigsaw, even though Drummond staff do laugh at me for my very rudimentary creation of a jigsaw. But for me, all of these things create creativity. It's not just having the idea, and it's not just being busy, and it's not just going somewhere. And where Drummond is in the middle of town in Edinburgh, we're hugely lucky. You know, we have the National Galleries on our doorstep, we've got different building projects, we've got different conservation projects. We really do have the pick of the crop, if you like. But just because you're busy doesn't mean that it has impact. So you can see there my different jigsaw pieces are the curiosity. Yeah, what if we did this? But then underneath that, it's right, well, tell me what the rigor is going to be. Tell me what the impact is going to be. And then to the left, yeah, you can absolutely do this, but you are going to be accountable if you're taking these children out of class X amount of times a week, X amount of times in a month, in a term, whatever it happens to be. What's that going to look like? And in the blue piece, it comes back down to that leadership and culture. If you can tell me that what you're doing is going to benefit our kids, however that you think that they might need it, and we've identified that in self-evaluation, then my answer is always going to be yes. And as I said before, what time do you need? What money do you need? Is it inclusive? And yes, it might fail, but if the nugget of the idea was absolutely sound, let's see what we learn from it, and let's go ahead and let's try it differently, another way. And the reason I think that I say yes so readily is because of my previous experience as a depute in Dunfermline High, where my former head teacher empowered me greatly. And that autonomy was absolutely brilliant. I have to say, I'm much more of a control freak than he is. So I make sure it's all written down and there's a plan. Tell me what you're going to do. Tell me when you're going to do it. Tell me when you're going to evaluate. And let's celebrate all the successes as we go along as well. Next slide, please, Charlotte. And yes, this is all about stickability, of course. If you're genuinely creative and you want to have that creative impact, then what you do has to stick. I'll be the first one, and I think that it was Carolyn who used the phrase epic fail. I had several epic fails in the first couple of years of my headship, and still some now, in terms of all these ideas, and I was dotting about, yeah, we'll do IDL and we'll do this and we'll do that and all the rest of it. And there was too much. Okay, so it's actually thinking about what are you going to put front and center of your practice? What's really important in your school? How are you going to do it? Why are you going to do it? Does it fit with your vision and your values? And how are you going to make it stick? Let's think out of the box, but if it's going to work, then we have to do it year on year. It has to be embedded. It has to be strategic, and it can't just hit that child in 3rd year at that particular point, although we know that there are little things that you do ad hoc that have to. But how are we going to make this something that is just part of what we do and supports our vision so that every single child coming through has that best experience? I said before as well, not making it this postcode or this teacher lottery as well. So the stickability is massively, massively important. And last slide, please, Charlotte. Oh, actually, I think that is my last. Yeah, okay. So this was just an example of the partnerships, the creative partnerships that we've been involved in that do have stickability. And there are a number of them there. And even as I've been looking back at this, as everybody else has been speaking, there are some in there that I haven't mentioned, such as LREC, who we're working with in terms of creating an actively anti-racist culture in school. And Daydream Believers, you were talking about that earlier, Josh, and it's actually one of our teachers, Philippa Drummond, who I think has been part of a creative conversation before. She has been one of the catalysts for this, and she's actually seconded to Edinburgh College and Napier 1 day a week to actually work on all the creative resources for that. And that started off with a Jodie, could I? And I said, yep, tell me about it. Tell me how it's going to work. Tell me what you need to do. And now it's becoming a creative thinking national progression award that's being rolled out across the country, which is brilliant. So that's quite high profile. But there are other things in there which are much less high profile that have worked really, really well for our kids, such as Edible Estates, which is for really vulnerable young people who are struggling to sustain a full-time timetable in school, to something like Design Engineer and Construct alongside Bentley. We're now the flagship Design Engineer Construct, which is the built infrastructure. And again, that's a level 5 and a level 6 as well. And I said yes to all of these, and I gave staff the scope and the space and the support to do it all. Some of them went through a couple of iterations of not working, but then you found the nugget of what had worked, and then you kept going with it as well. So maybe, David, maybe I was wrong to say to you last Friday, I'm not sure I have been very creative, because actually it was a really lovely opportunity to go back and think about what we had been doing and what had worked really well. And that's been lovely, actually, at the end of really quite a tough 15 and 18 months to look at things that some of this has been in abeyance because of lockdown, but I know that all of these partnerships are strong enough to pick them up when we're able to do so, when things start returning more to normality. So that's my perspective on creativity from a harassed head teacher lockdown angle. Thank you.
Jodie, that's an absolutely perfect note, not only to end the session on, but an absolute perfect note to end the series of conversations on. I think what you did was something that the conversation's been headed towards, and it's about get your foundations right, get your building blocks right, make clear to yourself and others what's important, and then stick to that. And I love the fact that you chose so many diverse pathways, but you made them all fit because you had the clarity of the map. And I love that idea that we set out the map for the school, we decide what the directions are, what the territories are, and then we give people the opportunity to find new ways across that. But if they're not moving across that territory, they need to apply these ideas somewhere else. And that's so much part of what we've been trying to do. Added to that, just the sheer dynamism, the sheer enthusiasm. And I loved it. I said to you when we spoke on the phone that Tim Brighouse talked about a colleague that he'd worked with in London, he'd said to him, what do you think is the secret of your success? And he said, my default position is yes. And you absolutely captured that. So that's brilliant. And we're running out of time. Great feedback on the chat for you, Jodie, and for the other speakers. We are indeed the Terminator. We will be back next year. We're going to come back, and we hope to have an absolutely exceptional round of conversations next year. We're hoping to have Douglas Stewart, the Booker Prize winning author of Shuggie Bain. We're hoping to have Mr. Wright, the footballing superstar and favourite video of mine. We're hoping to have Ian Wright, and Douglas Stewart talking about what inspirational teacher means. We're looking to get Andreas Schleicher. We're looking to look at climate change. We're looking to pick up on people who help us. Delighted to see Susie Lundy here tonight, who plays a key role in bringing together all sorts of partnerships and creative forces through drama. And we're hoping to build on that and look more at partnerships. We want to look at bilingualism. We want to get Paul Dix back, and we want to get Ollie Bray back.